Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. This is the Hackerspaces panel. I'm very happy. I'm Nick Farr. My Hackerspace is Hack DC. And I'm going to leave the rest of the introductions of this wonderful group of panelists that we have assembled here to Jens Oleg. So if you could give him a quick round of applause before he introduces everybody, that'd be great. Thank you.
So yeah, it's a bit crowded up here, but we have collected some people from all over the world for a big panel on hackerspaces, that is physical places where hackers make things. And right next to me, I'll introduce the panelists next. Right next to me is Bree Pettis, representing New York City Resistor, a hackerspace in Brooklyn, New York City. And next to him is Nick Farr from Washington, D.C., representing Hack DC, but he also has some stories to share about what was before hackerspace movement in the US. Then there is Esther Schneeweiss, or Astera, from hackerspacesorg and representing also the Meta Lab. Next to her is Philippe Langlois, representing Temp Lab, but also the French hackerspace community in total. And we have Jake Applebaum from San Francisco, from the hackerspace Noise Bridge. And last but not least, Enki Paulböhm from Vienna, from MetaLab, and also one of the minds behind hackerspacesorg. Yeah. So, a lot of things happened. Thank you. So yesterday I got the chance to speak to some of the panelists. Most of them couldn't even remember what happened since last year because it felt also distant, also far away. So many things had happened just in that 1 year. And I think it's safe to say that, things in the area of building collaborative spaces for hackers changed a lot just in the last 12 months. It was only at the camp in 2007 that some of the panelists got the inspiration for actually building a hackerspace, and that the whole movement got some momentum. And well, now look, we can barely fit all the people involved on at this table. Maybe we should start with Nick Farr and giving us the backstory of what inspired some of the panelists. Some of the hackerspaces are a little older, but some of the panelists to start their hackerspace in 2007.
Actually, I'd like to go, if possible, I'd like to go back a little bit earlier than that. My first Congress was the 23C3 several years ago, and at the time I was coming here to talk about the Hacker Foundation, and this is, I've told many people this privately, but I guess it's the first time I admitted publicly that at the 25C3, I was actually, or 23C3, I was actually really depressed with the state of the hacker scene in the United States, and it was when I came here that I was actually incredibly inspired. I was inspired by what was going on here at the Congress. I was inspired by what was going on at the Seabase, and at the Seabase, at the 23C3, just partying there and hanging out, it finally clicked in with me that what we were missing in the United States were hacker spaces that were open to the public, that anyone in the local community could come in and join and hack on things and, you know, code with other people, find other people that they didn't know that had similar interests. And it was this physical infrastructure that was public and open. We've had hacker spaces that were private. You know, the Loft is a good example, the Walnut Factory, the Hasty Pastry, all these private spaces that were very hidden and not known about. And what I believe we were missing in the United States were these public hacker spaces. And from that, and at the Seabase and at the 23C3, we came up with the idea for Hackers on a Plane. The idea being that I figured that if I were to bring really inspiring, awesome Americans like people that we see here, people from North America, this includes the United States, Canada, if we were to bring them here to Germany and show them hackerspaces and show them the camp and show them all the wonderful things that are going on here in the CCC and in Germany, that they would be inspired and they would go back to the United States and they would start doing over there exactly what had been going on here for many, many years. And I'm proud to say that's exactly what happened. Those of you who know Hackers on a Plane was a mildly stressful time for me personally. A little bit, but it was wonderful. I mean, that's where Bree was on that trip, and it was great to have him, and he started a wonderful hackerspace that he's going to tell you more about. Jake was on that trip, and many people who are sitting here in the third row are involved in hackerspaces that came out as a direct result of that. That NYC Resistor was born in the basement of the C4 in Cologne, and I'm eternally grateful to Jens, especially. Actually, Jens is a very, very important part of this. Without him, Hackers on a Plane would have been a complete disaster instead of only the mild disaster that it was. And if I could just, anybody who has anything to do with hackerspaces or has been inspired by anything that's been going in the US, please give Jens a gigantic, gigantic, heartfelt round of applause. Please just join me in thanking him. Yeah. At the C4, he came up with this speech, which many of you have seen and has been given here at the Congress. It's been given at Hope. It's been given many other times in many private places. It's been posted very thoroughly. These hackerspace design patterns that he came up with are the fundamental building blocks of many of the hackerspaces that you see sprouting up in the United States right now. And so is that where you wanted me to finish about?
Well, you mentioned NYC Resistor, and I think if we move in the timeline of what happened after that summer and after that tour that you took Americans on visiting hackerspaces, I think the Seabase was in it, and MetaLab in Vienna, other hackerspaces in other parts of Germany. And I think the first hackerspace that actually came out of that inspiration was NYC Resistor. So I will let Bree talk briefly about that.
So yeah, when there was this idea, I was sitting around. Before I lived in New York, I lived in Seattle and would spend a lot of my times at Hackerbot Labs, which is a space in Seattle. And I was sitting around, and they were like, hey, you should go on this Hackers on a Plane tour. And then as soon as I signed up, they were like, you just paid $1,337 to the Hacker Foundation. Ha 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 ha. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And we went, and it was really magical. And then after 2 weeks of going to the camp, being completely dazzled, overdosing on Club Mate, and traveling around, and then we went to MetaLab, we went to C4, Entropia, Das Labor, which is filled with hard hacking goodness, and all these other. We did as much as we could in like 2 weeks, and finally we ended up at C4, and I was talking to George, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm from New York." We realized after spending 2 weeks with each other that we were basically from the same place, and we just kind of decided, okay, well, what if we did this? And we started. Like 4 hours later, we brute forced the name NYC Resistor because it was available, and then we just started meeting every week, every Tuesday, and it started out with 3 people, and it was like 3 people for like 4 weeks, and we just started scheming up how to make it bigger, made up this idea of the microcontroller study group to kind of like find people who are of the same like kind of mind, who are into it, and then the right people just got involved, and we just kept going. And it was one of those things that once 4 people decided that it was going to exist, it was like there was no stopping it. And at this point, I'm pretty sure it's just going to keep going no matter what any one of us has to do.
Yeah, and from that on, hackerspaces just like mushroomed. Next was Hack DC, and then later there was something in San Francisco, and we will get to that later definitely. But as you know, it's the same in the computer world as in social phenomena. There's really nothing new in the world. Whatever you try, there is always someone who has thought of it before. And I think one of the biggest inspirations and in putting a lot of thought in how to build a hackerspace in a sustainable way was Enki, and he kind of built a model hackerspace with the MetaLab in Vienna. So maybe you can just briefly say a few words about the thoughts you gave in building the MetaLab.
Yeah, so I think I'll go a little bit back because some of the people here have never been to a hackerspace. So the idea of MetaLab was that Vienna had a lot of people doing really awesome things with hardware and software, and they barely met. They met at the Congress, some of them, some met at some user groups or online in forums, but there was no place where you could meet, where you could work on projects, and where you just could get a feel for what's happening in your city, conceive new ideas, start working, buy expensive hardware, and all the tools you need to do stuff, to really create things, to make things, to change things. And so our idea was basically taking a few of the hints we took from the organization structure of Chaos Computer Club and of Seabase, and say we want something that's more general, that's not focused on any specific subject. We just want a place where we don't even know what people do cool projects in the city and what are these projects. And so we wanted a space that's just infrastructure. And I think that's the most basic definition of a hackerspace. It's a place where you have infrastructure, work on projects, where you have a social network of people also working on projects who can inspire you and help you with your projects. And for us, this process started 4 years ago when we were meeting at, actually 2 people back then were meeting at a local civil liberties union called Quintessence. We were hanging out there, and they were so focused on their projects, and we like to participate in those projects, but we just found out we have other interests that don't fit into the specific mold of this organization. We need a more general organization that just provides space. And after a while, we talked to people within the city, we organized events, and we kind of figured out the key essence to make this happen. It's just to get enough people excited about the thing, make a list, let people write their name on it and say, I'm paying 20 euros a month, and if 40 people do this, we can afford a really cool space. And yeah, that's how MetaLab started. And I think the most important lessons we learned there were, don't let the state of your city discourage you. Vienna was a very bleak place for net culture and hacker culture. Very few people knew each other, but things were definitely happening. But now we are one of the largest, probably the largest hackerspace that got founded in the last 5 years, with over 130 paying members and 300 to 400 people around it. We've got a really nice space directly next to the city hall, and all this happened because it was a bleak space, because people were energetic, they wanted change in the city. And the other lesson we learned is, don't be scared. If you don't think you can finance it, try it. Just go to people, say, if we find enough people, will you pay? Sign your name here. Only if we find enough people. Don't solve problems that don't exist. Just focus on building energy, meeting people, getting things done.
Yeah, that's really one point that is important to remember. People will always tell you, but in my city it's different. We have different problems, and everyone will tell you that, you know, because every city is different, but it's basically just the same problems. So one of the things that got their inspiration almost directly from MetaLab was, I think, the French hackerspace movement. And Phil even went the extra mile, and last summer, I think, he organized a hackerspace fest in Paris, and I'm still very angry at myself that I couldn't make it there, but I've heard it was a really great conference. So could you please tell me what happened there?
Okay, so just to make the connection with MetaLab, for us, two very big examples for the temp lab were Seabase and MetaLab, and basically the people just said, oh, how to get all the people together, because we can't really meet all the people each Thursday when we meet. That's a ritual. Each Thursday everybody get together, so we said, let's make a party, and because people like to party. And then the goal of it was just to mix hacking and arts and performances on a 1-week session with 2-day conferences. So these 2-day conferences first were regular hacker conferences style, a bit like HIP or all the more expensive conferences. I would say with a different bias, giving it a more colored atmosphere.
Yeah.
Trying to get some people who wouldn't fit usually in security conference and try to, well, you know, to get into the social changing capability and effect that hacking has on our daily life. And then to go towards some more pleasing things like workshops and performances. And what we had was a great mix, actually such a mix that I think we won't be able to do it again like it was. Crazy things happen. We even have some kinkiness creeping hacker scene, and usually that doesn't mix. So that was quite funky, yeah, funny and funky. So the thing is, it's quite an experience to live, and the goal of the temp lab is exactly what is in the name. It's to create something that you'll be proud to live and to change society with, and you'll be part of it, and not try to find a new golden seat where people stay and creep into some new cathedral. Our goal is to clone the bazaar. Our goal is to show to people that anybody with very few space can run a hackerspace and with no organization at all. Create a hackerspace fest, which was, to me, a great success. 200 people, it's small, but it was just so much fun, so much sharing, and so much new connection. Practical work, I say nothing during Hackerspace Fest. That was no great invention. But the thing is, we created many sparks in the eyes of so many people that got the idea to, hey, let's make a hackerspace. And we see hackerspaces popping up in Brussels, in Montreal, everywhere. That's the goal of it, to share the fun, share the passion, and even with our broken English, try to communicate with people. So basically, that was it.
Well, yeah, the language of the internet is broken English, right? So after that, it really became apparent that what is happening here is like an international movement on an international scale. And Esther and Enki got together, and yeah, the name was there, Hackerspaces. We used that name for all the time we were talking about it. We're still unclear on some subtleties, like sometimes we write it as 2 words, hacker spaces. Sometimes we write it as a whole new word smashed together, hackerspaces. But yeah, there is a movement there, but it needed an outlet. And what was created was a website and a wiki page to bring together all the hackerspaces in the world. Maybe, Esther, you could just briefly introduce what work is going on there.
So it's actually only just a couple of months ago that the wiki page and the website went online, and that we were proclaiming the founding of an over institution like hackerspacesorg, while the idea of having someone to bring the basic motivation and idea of hackerspace movement to the people was born way earlier by people like Enki and Jens and so on. And for now there's way more people working on this project. And what was the initial idea was that we see hackerspaces popping up all over the world. Actually, within the last year, there was an extremely high expansion to that. And basically these hackerspaces all have a pretty huge fear, like they're afraid of what could happen within the initial process of founding the space. Like, what could go wrong? Is there enough people? Can we find a space? All these questions you'd have to ask yourself. The fear of failing. But basically, these are all questions that have already been answered. These are all challenges that have already been faced by other hackerspaces. And so people who want to found a new hackerspace could just, if they would ask around, if this knowledge about how to found a hackerspace would be more common, people wouldn't be that afraid of finding a new one, and the movement would spread. So, actually, I would like to tell you a short story. As some of you might know, some of you might not. Bree was visiting Vienna a couple of days ago, actually, only. And we were talking about how to communicate this process, like, to the outer world. And we came up with the idea of creating a hackerspaces book within, like, no time. We would put together a bunch of interesting hackerspaces from all over the world, like who would like to participate and who would have the time to actually participate, and put together how a couple of questions they'd have to answer on how they got their project started, how they became a hackerspace, where they took their motivation from. And we've had like no sleep at all within this time, and still was an incredibly inspirational process of making and putting together all these things. And within the last days, I got an email by a South African hackerspace, which is called Duct Tape. This is, as far as I know, the first hackerspace in Africa. They didn't yet have a space, but they're actively looking for some. And what they were writing to us was, we have that wiki page with a list of all hackerspaces, and we could see we have a map on there that shows where are a lot of hackerspaces or where aren't any. And since I saw one popping up in Africa only recently, I wanted to be that one specifically in the book. And I wrote them an email, and they got back to me saying, actually they didn't yet find a space, and they were afraid, and they didn't know what to do. And I was like, well, then you're practically, you still know those questions you have in your head that make this feeling of fear, and you should just send in something, and we'll put it in the appendix. And what they sent in was a link to a blog post one of the three founders of Duct Tape made in August, I think, no, July, end of July, which was right after The Last Hope. And at The Last Hope, we had a hackerspace panel, which was hosted by Nick Farr. And of course, it was recorded, and recording spread, and you could download them or buy the DVD or whatever. So that founder of Duct Tape got hold of a copy of that talk and watched it and was like, oh my God, hackerspace, this is what I always wanted to do. Like, this is what I always wanted to create. And although he had felt the urge of doing open source projects or other projects in a team together with other people before, he had never before heard of the idea of hackerspaces or the term itself. So he got inspired by this panel talk so much that he put out this blog post and was asking for people to get back to him and say if they were interested in creating a hackerspace. And by now they are a group of 12 people, still expanding. And only just within the last 4 days that I got back to him saying that I was very, I don't know, I was so happy to hear this. They were happy to get this feedback, also from hackerspaces.org, and they were looking into legal structures and spaces, and put a huge effort in all this and got a few steps further.
Yeah. So one of the goals of this panel is actually to give you a guilt trip. Like if there's not a hackerspace in your city, after this panel you should go out and meet with other people from that city and build one. And if people are actually building hackerspaces in Africa, your excuses are invalid, right? But people will tell you about bootstrapping being the hardest part of building a hackerspace, and one place that did the bootstrapping very thoroughly, so to say, is Noisebridge in San Francisco. And in my opinion, I know there's a lot of local rivalry going on, but if there should be one place in the world where there should be a hackerspace, then it's definitely San Francisco, with its closeness to Silicon Valley and its history of the counterculture and whatever. It's just the place for a hackerspace, but yet it didn't have one until September this year, right? So Jake, tell us the story of what took you so long with bootstrapping Noisebridge.
Well, so, I mean, hackerspaces as a concept is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, I sort of have always considered the CCC sort of similar to the occult clubs of the late 19th century. It's like studying esoteric knowledge, just like really strange things, being interested in all sorts of facets of the world, basically. And Noisebridge is definitely not the only hackerspace in San Francisco. It's just, I guess, the one that's most closely identifying with hackerspaces. Like, there's like the Flower Shop. There used to be a place called New Hack City. And one of the issues is that a lot of the people in the Bay Area have been pretty burnt out on some of the communal spaces that have existed there, because maybe their structure didn't work so well for the diverse population. And so we had to sort of bootstrap a community together, and that took a long time because we wanted to avoid the 4 people have a key, that this is their space thing that we perceived to be an issue. And so we sort of just had meetings about things we wanted to do, and it's sort of like design pattern -1 or something, where it's like you have to like first have a group of people, and then have all of those people have things that they're doing in common. So it's not just talking about things or meeting at a dorkbot and watching talks or giving talks, but like actually making an effort to always get together. And it became a problem that we didn't have a space, which worked out quite well, because eventually when we really needed to solve that problem, it was solved. Someone actually went and found a space. And for a while we were talking about having a space club, which was maybe not the best club to be a part of. But it was great, because it meant that the only people that were really involved were people that were really dedicated to it. So, you know, for a long time people said, oh, it's impossible to do such a thing, and we wouldn't have the money, wouldn't have the backing. The first day that we found a space, made a call for money, we raised $12,000 US, which wasn't bad. So we were basically in the black our very first month, and we still have like 10 grand in the bank or something like that, paying our rent. And we came up with an organizational structure where the leaders have all of the responsibility they want to take and all of the liability that comes with it without any extra benefits. So if you're on like the board of directors, like Mitch is a treasurer, and he takes care of all of that. He only gets the extra burden. He doesn't get anything else. And he does this because he really loves it, which creates this really interesting power vacuum, which is that a lot of people tried to be in a position where they could really direct the space. And there was, every time you try to climb the ladder, even if you bring your own ladder, you don't like get anywhere, because you just end up having a bunch of liability, and if you don't work really hard, you hang yourself. And so it took a long time to get people that were interested in that, because this is a concept that I think is actually kind of foreign to a lot of Americans. Sharing and so on is, I mean, it's something that, you know, supposedly San Francisco embodies, but like it was like, you know, after the Summer of Love, you could get mugged in the Haight-Ashbury, so it's maybe kind of a rumor. So it's been an interesting experience, because we run basically like an anarchist collective, but we shy away from the term anarchist collective because there's one around the corner, and we don't want to like bite their style. Station 40. So they like squatted an old post office or something. So it took us a long time, because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't like one person or 10 people, but rather a community of people that really felt like it belonged to them. Like after a month, people stop asking if they can paint on the walls. And if they want to paint on the walls, they just do it. Or if they want to like build a new shower, they do it. Or build the dark room, they just do it. Because they've become enough of the community that they know that they have the authority that is inherent in their membership in the group, as opposed to asking for permission from other people. And it's a little bit different than some of the other spaces, but I think it works pretty well.
I think every space is kind of like different from the other spaces because all the spaces kind of find the structure that fits them. And I have seen two examples of what I think are both working structures in NYC Resistor and HackDC, and they are both completely the opposite of each other. So in terms of openness, how you select members of your groups, and how open the group is to new members. So I really don't want to comment on that because obviously both structures work, but I just want Bree and Nick to give an example of how you stress the openness or the closeness of your groups at NYC Resistor and HackDC.
So when we first met, we raised money ourselves. We had 9 founders, and we each put in $1,000. And it was a really interesting shift as soon as people put money into something. Before that moment, we were all like, a bunch of people were kind of like very cynical and like, I don't know. And then as soon as they put $1,000 in, it was like, yes, this is going to work, no matter what. And it also, I mean, at that point, it was kind of like whoever freaking came to the meetings regularly and was friendly, kind of got on the sort of routine. And we also, the other thing we were doing at the beginning was we were eating together. We would all go to each other's house and make food to each other, which is kind of a special thing that builds friendship, I think. And then we got our space, and it was very exciting. And we started getting new members. And the way that it worked, the way that it continues to work, is the idea is basically to be a member, you have to have some sort of kung fu. You shouldn't creep out girls. And there's some other things too. Like basically, the whole group has to. It has to be somebody that anybody in the group would feel comfortable giving their home keys to for like a month and going out of the country. Now this makes it so that it's not just like anybody off the street can come in and say like, I'm giving you $75 a month, I'm a member. It's a little bit more get to know you process, and our goal is actually to be like really inviting and every Thursday night, we post it on our calendar, there's like a hack craft night, which is really great because it's a mixture of people knitting and people doing software and people laser cutting and doing whatever they can imagine. And it's pretty open. It's usually there's like 10 people there just working on stuff, and usually about half the people I don't know. And kind of our routine is like if you get to know us, and we'll invite you if it seems like a nice fit. But that's really different from being like a community center type space or something like that. We all have keys, and if somebody comes and visits us, it's fine. But it's not like we're not so much a community-like center. If that makes sense.
HackDC operates on a somewhat different model. Anybody that wants to sign up to subscribe and pay dues, much like they do it here in Germany. On our website, you just click subscribe and start paying dues, and if the payment clears, you show up at a meeting. Anybody can join HackDC. Our whole operating theory is that if you're willing to pay $600 a year to support something, that you're not going to do anything to bring harm to it. And so far, that theory, and for us, has proven correct. Now, I know Washington, D.C. is a fundamentally different place than New York. And all the people who are involved in HackDC right now, we have people, people who are 60 years old, we have people who are 16 years old. A couple of people have done a lot of really great work, have come in and spent many, many hours helping build shelves, helping organize, helping go through recycling computers and things like that. And the paying membership has agreed to, waive their dues and, because of all that work that they're doing. And I like the fact that HackDC is an incredibly diverse group of hackers, and we all bring a little something to the table. I believe very, very strongly that hackerspaces should be open, that they should be places that anybody can come in and join and participate in. All of HackDC's events are public and free and open. Of course, there's some space availability issues. But I'm very, very strongly dedicated to the idea of openness, because I think that's what was missing in the hackerspace scene before, and so far it's been great. Actually, the tech community in Washington, D.C. is still shocked by this. When we announce events on our blog or when we Twitter about events, we realize now that we have to very, very strongly emphasize that these events are free and open to the public. They're not just for the members. And because of the way we're organized in the United States, as a District of Columbia nonprofit corporation, we have to stay open and connected very strongly with our community. A lot of the work that we're doing is directly for the benefit of the community. We're setting up a wireless network to help support the other community organizations in the facility that we're in. We do things like serve food to the homeless on Thanksgiving, and we try very strongly to, when we're thinking about our projects and working on different things, working on our code, working on our microcontrollers, taking things apart, we try to think, what about the projects that we're doing are helping give hackers a good name and helping take back the term hacker in the United States. And that's our model, and that's what we've been successful and happy with. It's not always very happy and shiny. There are some people involved in my hackerspace who need some lessons on socialization, and that's fine. They're learning that, and that's really great. And it's not perfect, but I don't think it's even entirely a different model. I think just because there's that one little difference, there's nothing that there's nothing good or bad about it. Every hackerspace needs to be very responsive to the needs of the community that's come and formed around it. And our community that's formed at HackDC feels very strongly, as I do, about keeping the space open, about keeping membership open to everybody else. And that's just what we do, and you may find that works well for you and your community. You may find that doesn't work well for you and your community. And whatever works is what you should do.
But structure problems are really tricky. And once you have like two people with the goal of building a hackerspace, you have a common vision, and once the third person enters, you have potential drama. And it's like that. And you have to find something to manage that, even exercise, democracy or something like that within the hackerspace. And one of the most inspiring things was the story that Enki told me about the only time they had to decide something by vote at the hackerspace in Vienna. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I want to approach the issue from the side of, so you've got a hackerspace. What are you going to do with it? That's a big question. You have people, and people you have the bike shed problem. You have, everyone wants to make a decision on the color of the bike shed, because that's a really simple thing, and everyone is deciding at the beginning, and everyone is so excited. You have these meetings, and well, people have to listen to you if you say something. It's really exciting, and in the beginning it's very hard to make decisions at all in a group like that. So what are you going to do with this space? And after visiting hackerspaces and seeing other hackerspaces getting started and just seeing how it goes into different directions but still works, I think that stuff of how the hackerspace operates, of how it works, it needs to be encoded in the people, in the group. You cannot write it. I mean, you can try to write the manifesto, but people are not reading that stuff. People are not reading. In the beginning, of course, you read it because you need to send this paper somewhere to incorporate. But later on, people don't even read our wiki. I don't read our wiki anymore. So it's just too much information, too long, didn't read. So you need to encode that stuff in the group. So you need to build the group and focus on that for the beginning. And you will have problems, and you need to solve them when they come up. Because if you avoid them, you probably will not have a space. If you try to avoid problems, well, you do nothing. So problems come up, you need to solve them. So the guiding principle there is to have a group that's flexible. So before I go into what Jens was asking me about, I think the most important thing, I measure the health of a hackerspace in its renewal cycle. How quickly new people come in, and, well, old people will leave. That's not a good thing, but how quickly new people come in and how quickly they can get into positions of explicit power. What I mean with that is the board. You don't want people to be stuck in a position of power because it's not a good position. Actually, it's not a position of power. So let's redefine that. If you start at Hackerspace, part on day one with the idea that you're going to make decisions there. Your job is to moderate the process, talk to people what they want to do, and interpret what's the consensus. What should happen? How should we use the space? Talk to people, make sure the group together figures out what's happening. Good. So what happens if someone wants to force his opinion on your group? Let's say you're 40 people, you just started out, and you're trying to make a room plan. And everyone is arguing, and maybe even someone writes down a plan, and people are changing this plan wildly in the wiki, and there's chaos. How do you make sense of these opinions? How do you condense that? We kind of learned that actually there is a majority opinion after talking. So first you need to encourage people to actually talk instead of hitting each other. And once they talk, people will still say, well, I want my thing, my vision to be implemented. And we built the whole structure in a way of saying, there's the board's job is to moderate and to do all the shitty stuff of doing accounting, of talking with authorities and bullshit like that, which is no fun at all. And the rest of the decisions should just happen. We don't really want to vote on them, but we don't even want to vote on them when we're bigger. So how do you do that? You make it so that people cannot force their opinion on you. So you say, you meet weekly, you start, give me a second, it's a tough one to describe this in English, but I'm trying. So you make a weekly meeting at the beginning, you discuss the issues, and if there's no agreement, you ask people to make multiple plans. Don't change the plan of someone else, make a new plan, and then we can vote on it. And whenever someone would actually force us to make a room plan, and I think this is the story Jens was getting at. So, sorry, it took a little bit longer, but what happened immediately after we got our space, we settled in, some people joined the club with an agenda, and that agenda was ban smoking in the space in all the rooms, completely, no compromises. Never mind that about 30 to 40% of Austrians smoke, and maybe we could use a room, we could find some compromise. And these people never showed up doing anything else except lobbying for non-smoking. They never showed up later. They just joined because it was their, well, holy goal. So instead of fighting with them, what we asked them to is make a room plan, make a suggestion. We're going to have 5, 6, 10 room plans, and we're going to have people vote on this. And we did a vote. People could sort, it's like in the DBM project. You don't just say, I want this choice, but you can sort the various options. I like this one best, this plan second best. We calculated the result, and the result was exactly what people expected, what seemed to be the consensus at first. And since then, we never had to vote on anything again, because it's pretty obvious. Everyone kind of knows what's the majority opinion. Everyone kind of knows what's okay. And you really got to be very stubborn to force a vote, because you're going to lose anyway. People are going to vote what they think is right. So there's no power there. The board can't make decisions. It's really easy to kick the board. 10% of the members can kick the board, and the board's only job is to moderate. So that's the structure you want. And you want to renew the board at least every 2 years, I think, because it's a very stressful job.
Yeah. So yeah, the lesson learned here is favor consensus over majority rule, and always yield to the hands-on. And I think it would be nice to round up that panel with actually telling a story of what happens in hackerspaces, what people are actually hacking on. So I understand that we have a room after that. Nick, what room was it?
It's C04, which I believe is on this side.
So everyone who is inspired by this panel can come to that room and we can hang out and conspire. But what I really want to close with is stories of success and failures in your hackerspaces. So everyone on the panel just give a short story of what is a great success and maybe a failure story in your hackerspace. Bree.
It's it's interesting. One of the ways that things get done in our space is we do vote actually kind of a lot, but it's always it seems to be in favor. Kind of the way that things get done is by people proposing a plan and then everybody supports it, and we vote in binary. So somebody says, "I really want to do this," and everybody kind of around the room goes 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And there's only been I don't even know what the examples are when it hasn't worked. Maybe somebody said 0 and brought up concern before something got forwarded. But the idea is, like, if somebody brings something up, they want something to happen and they've got a plan, it generally goes forward and gets lots of support. One of the things that I'm really pleased and excited about is this year we got a laser, which is a $20,000 laser cutter that you can put in, fire the laser is what we say every time we push it. And it's a laser cutter, and we make anybody who comes and wants to laser cut something, they have to push the button, they have to say fire the laser. And it's really interesting. A lot of people will be like, fire the laser? And then the rest of the people in the room will be like, that's not enthusiastic enough. And so we all end up sounding like pirates. The way we did it was interesting. We had a little committee. We had the laser guidance committee, which met and came up with this plan. We had this plan that was very very maybe communistic. We were all going to put in the number of members, the cost of the laser divided by the number of members and by the laser, and then we would have it, and everybody could use it free of charge, and it would be ours, and it would be endless fun. And we presented this, and it met with immediate resistance. Everybody was like, no. That's the communist approach. We want the capitalist approach. And basically it turned into anybody who wanted to put in $500 or $1,000 could be on the new laser committee, and we would get a laser, and the people who put the money in would be they would get a little bit of a cheaper discount on it, but we all pay to use the laser to pay ourselves back eventually. And it's basically the same plan. Except that it's a little bit more like it required more responsibility from people. I'm getting glares from my community members here for some reason. And
it's very neoliberal.
From the communists, of course. So it was one of those things where there were a number of people who just, we put this idea that we wanted to have a laser together, and a number of people said, I have no reason to have a laser in this space. There's no reason why I would ever use this. And of course, but they also said, there's no reason I want this, but there's so many people interested in it, I'm willing to lay down some money just because I'm curious what's going to happen. And it's turned out really well. It's really fun. Literally, when you get a laser, it's 12 inches by 24 inches, and everything you see gets divided into things that will fit in the laser and what won't.
You mean I got to follow up that? I think our greatest. I think our greatest success is just. Is this okay? Our greatest success is that we just that we continue to grow and be around and keep expanding. I mean, I can't, there's so many things that come to mind. I can't just focus and single out one particular thing. The fact that there are people that believe in the concept of it, that there are people who believe in keeping it open. We just opened up our workshop. Downstairs, we acquired another space in the facility that we're in. We keep accumulating members all of the time. Some of them show up maybe 2 or 3 times a month. Some of them are there every single day. I think our greatest success is just that we really continue to exist and continue to grow and continue to go to places and conferences like these and continue to inspire people both inside our community and continue to inspire people in other places to build their own hackerspaces. And as far as failure, I know when I'm talking with people in my hackerspace, I constantly think that everything is failing, that this thing didn't work right, that thing didn't work right. We're having an issue right now with, now that we have our workshop, we're reconfiguring our main space to make it a little bit more electronics focused. Right now we do everything from major wood construction to very fine disassembly of certain certain printers and VCRs and different things like that, things that are approaching the end of their life cycle, to very, very small, fine electronics work, and we want to refocus and repurpose our main space. But as far as our greatest failure, I would probably just have to say that NYC Resistor beat us to having a laser, and that's basically it. Oh, okay, no, actually, you're right. That was our greatest. That actually is an issue that now came up. I got an email about that. HackDC is actually in an Episcopal church in Washington, D.C. There are many different community organizations that are a part of that church. We're not members of the church itself. We use a room, or actually two rooms in their facility, and other community organizations use rooms in their facility. We have access to their auditorium, their dining room, and they even let us use the sanctuary for our... Yes, actually, they let us use the sanctuary for parties. And I don't necessarily want to call this a failure, but so Johannes over there, who fortunately reminded me of this, because all of the other rooms in where we're at were in use on the day during our grand opening ceremonies, when we invited Johannes and Monochrome to come in and just do a brief presentation, or do a nice presentation. I told Johannes, look, we're going to be in the sanctuary. It's a big room. It's also the church where they have their religious ceremonies and mass and things like that.
It freaked me out.
And so he said, oh, that sounds good. And I could tell over email that he was a little bit too excited about that. And so I'm sitting there, I'm enjoying his presentation, Kiki and Boo Boo and all of that. I love Kiki and Boo Boo, by the way. And so out of nowhere, he unfurls this banner that says, I think, 2008, the year of polytheism, right in front of the altar, and has that banner in perfect frame shot.
The number of the beast is 1. Yes.
Huh?
The
what?
number of the beast is 1.
Yeah. And so, actually, it was just a couple of days ago, I was in Germany, and I got an email from the church coordinator who found the pictures of that ceremony on the internet, and he was like, yeah, Nick, what was up with this? And I was like, man, those people from Vienna, but it was okay.
Maybe we could go a bit quicker because we're running out of time.
So, I think our biggest success, and that may sound silly, but was to open, actually, the TempLab hackerspace. Because, as you may not know now, French Interior Ministry started a fake Chaos Computer Club, the CCCF, the Chaos Computer Club of France, 15 years ago, or 15 years ago. And this was a sting operation from the counter-terrorism. We were already in the spot at that time, imagine. So the thing is, these people made a lot of harm to France community. Because as you know, hacking groups and hacking community are like little island, volcanic island, creating themselves, emerging, and then starting to appear and to go to very interesting high levels. So by doing that, the whole notion of community in France was destroyed. Also, the problem was a confidence problem was created, a trust problem between all the international community of hackers and whatever would happen in France. Because I must make an homage or pay respect to Stéphane Vernery, who was also jailed by French services for 6 months. He was one of the very active chaos member in the 1980s, and because French services didn't understand anything, he got jailed. So this was the legacy we had to deal with, and actually it's a bit serious and not very pleasing success, but that's something to be reminded. The biggest success that we had and we've done is changing in people's mind the image of a hacker who is supposedly a criminal, a guy who is not responsible, into someone who does creative things with technology. And that is, I think, our biggest success.
Jake?
Now,
Yeah. Jake? So, a success story from Noisebridge.
should I say failure?
Oh, if you
Because failure, we just have only failures. It's chaos. So here is the Chaos Computer Club, but what we do in Temp Lab is, oh, what about an organization? Yeah, we don't want to make a startup, we don't want to buid a cathedral, we don't want this, and it's complete chaos. People come in, do things, and we never succeeded to fix the tidying up. So there's crap everywhere. And we keep on saying, hey, why do I have to deal with someone else's crap? So one thing that Mitch told me that was great is that you have to be excellent to someone. That's what you do in Noisebridge. Well, in Temp Lab, it's completely chaos, quite the opposite. It's you have to have very tight relationship in Temp Lab, because otherwise you wouldn't bear the quantity of crap that we have to bear and put up with. We had to deal with rats. We had to deal with a chemical factory producing fumes that are very bad for your health. Actually, it's Sanofi Aventis, and these people are following the pharmaceutical mantra, which is very interesting. Make people die locally so that you can cure globally. And we keep on getting this. So failures and failures.
That's hard to follow up. So Noisebridge tried to follow the hackerspace design patterns pretty well. I think almost to the letter in some regards. We don't have people that live there. I mean, we did find some people who lived there, but they left because we asked them to. They were kind of members, sort of. But we had a couple of failures. One, the very first failures we had was the key problem, which is that we had a single tumbler lock, and 5 people signed the lease, and these 5 people didn't talk before signing the lease, really, because we just found the space and we decided to just jump on it, and we decided it was the time. And the problem was that each of those 5 people had a different expectation, and it created an issue with property rights. And it turned into kind of a big disaster because we didn't have insurance, and one of the key holders felt very strongly about this, and a lot of the, like I would say maybe 2.5 of the key holders felt strongly in a different direction, which put us in a really weird space because we're all legally equal in our liability, but without insurance we were all really very concerned. And so it turns out the membership solved this on their own. They just copied the keys and they picked the lock. So that solved the key problem pretty much. And when we pointed out that there was no point in changing the lock because it was a bunch of hackers that specialize in things like lock picking, that it was just like not worth changing it. It was at that point that basically everyone was persuaded that, yep, there's a lot of liability, and if anyone wants to back out, they can do so. We'll try to get insurance real soon now. And eventually we did get insurance, which worked out pretty well. And it was great because that was an example of almost sort of trying to solve a problem before it really occurred, because it didn't matter if a key holder was there. If someone fell off a ladder and broke their neck, like, we were all screwed. I mean, there was no question about that. But we just decided that, like, you know, hopefully no one would do that. And if they did, well, that would be the end of that. And we'd start a new organization, No Neck Breaking Bridge or something. We had another strange failure, which was, real quick, which was basically anonymous membership, which is that we want to preserve the right for people to be members without, you know, affiliating themselves publicly with this, because maybe they work in some organization that would not take kindly to hackers, because it doesn't matter how much we, like, whitewash this with, like, CISSPs and other sorts of, like, responsible hacking stuff. There are people that just simply can never be affiliated with that. And there was a huge row about this because of legal requirements in California. People were, like, pretty concerned that we had to have a name. And it turns out that we had a lawyer advise us that the name could be whatever name they gave us, and we don't, like, check IDs. So that works out fine because we trust our members to be excellent to each other. And that's our slogan, basically. Be excellent to each other. That's our only code of conduct, which was the thing that led us to solve all of our failures, which is that we were just excellent to each other. So at any point in time. And that was the first of our successes. And we basically went from there to actually succeed on things like Andy's blimp. He has a remote-controlled blimp that you can SSH into and fly it around the room from your telephone, which is pretty awesome. And he built a bunch of the hardware. And it's like free hardware and free software and schematics. And we had our first hacker in residence, which was a major success, which was a guy who didn't have I don't know, some sort of, you know, literal agreement for being the hacker in residence. But he built this, which is, if you can see it, it's a PCI riser card wrapped in wire. And this is a small circuit board with a switch. And the idea is that you plug it into an iPod, and you play back magnetic stripe data. And this is a filter, and this is the output device. And you put this next to a magnetic read head, and then you play back whichever card you wanted to use, right? We basically wanted to make ourselves sort of like non-academic, non-commercial research in some regard, and this has worked out pretty well. So, like, all of our equipment is donated with no strings attached, which means there's no drama. When, like, our drill press came in, it was great because the guy that brought it, he said, you know, I love this, I have it at my house, and people didn't use it, you know, at my house, so I'll bring it here and it doesn't matter what happens to it. And so it's great because we even, like, lift the burden from other people when they have these things that are just too much for them at their own home, and then they bring it in and get to train people, and it empowers them to be teachers. And so they've really enjoyed that. And I think that that's probably the best success of all, is that each person that's become a member has been really empowered by this. So.
I think we are over time already, but speaking of non-commercial, I would really love to end this thing with a practical example of hackerspace solidarity for a hackerspace you all know and love here in Berlin, the Seabase. And I think Esther has something to say about that.
Yes, actually I do. So since the hackerspaces.org thing is all about community actually and helping other people out, the Seabase got a huge power bill looming actually, and we helped out in terms of we collected fancy, geeky, weird collectibles from hackerspaces all around, and we're putting them together, and we'll be hosting an event on the 29th at the Seabase. Where we're going to auction off all these things, and I'm not going to say what it is because it's like some kind of surprise. Also, on this day, there'll be 2 more talks at the Seabase, which are very interesting, but in German, if that makes a difference to you. And there'll be a food hacking workshop by Mark Powell, which he also donates to this Power to the People event itself. And I think we have 2 tickets left for that.
So, December 29th, show your hackerspace solidarity, unite, multiply, what was it? Build, unite, multiply. So that was the hackerspace panel. You can join us at...
we have a workshop now, and I just want to say we want to build an organization, an international organization around the website and the community especially. So if you're interested in that, even if you already have a hackerspace, join up with us, meet us. What's the room number?
The room number C.
Room number is C04.
Yeah.
We're doing this like in 10 minutes, so you have time to
I
get
believe it's just right over here.
right. We'd love to see people who, okay, it's over there. We'd love to see people who want to build a hackerspace themselves, who like the idea, who feel tempted to raise something in the same way, as well as people who already built a hackerspace to share their emphasis.
We have limited rooms, so if you're just, you can meet us around here if you just want to talk, but if you really want to build one, you're curious about that, come. And if you have something to contribute, come too.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have maybe one last thing. Okay.
Well.
Oh, it's okay. But it wasn't.